Okay, cool. Thanks, everybody. I didn't know if we were getting an intro or not. We're not. So we're live. First, I'd like to thank everybody for joining us today. This has been something that we've been super excited about, the three of us, for quite some time. Today, we're going to be talking about, I keep on, every time I read this, I think gaming C-suite support, and it's kind of, we are going to talk a little bit about gaming, but we're going to talk about really how you embrace and bring your leadership into your cloud go-to-market strategy to increase your ability to succeed faster, and to scale better. And so we're going to have a bunch of things to talk about today. I'm going to try to keep it moving quickly. I really want to spend a couple minutes just introducing our guests. I have with me two of the most phenomenal human beings on the planet, let alone minds in marketplace. So I'm really excited to spend more time with Christine and Hillorie. Christine Puccio is the founder of Mercata, who is a fantastic consultancy working with large companies and companies kind of all varieties and helping them on this marketplace journey. Christine comes to us from quite a background, a ton of experience, a lot of scars, a lot of bruises, a lot of learning, and has done a fantastic job throughout her career at places like Sun Microsystems, Red Hat, Nginx, F5, JFrog, just to name a couple of them. So much of what we'll talk about today will come from the foundational learning that Hillorie and Christine have had at some of these great places, right? And so really excited to bring their experience and Christine's experience specifically working with those organizations and developing and launching cloud go-to-market strategies, organizations, teams. And then we've got Hillorie Farace Villaforesta, which I always say like in Italian, although Hillorie is joining us from France. And so we may have some internet blips and blobs because apparently Normandy isn't the internet hotspot of the world. I didn't know this, but it seems to be going pretty well so far. Any technical difficulties aside, Hillorie is a powerhouse of her own. She has done amazing things at companies like HPE, VMware, NetApp, Splunk, and is most recently the former head of Global Cloud Alliances at Dataiku. And both Hillorie and Christine Tackle was fortunate enough to do a lot of work with across several of those organizations. And I have come to get to know Hillorie and Christine very, very well, both as customers and as friends, as we all kind of trek on this journey in tech and cloud go-to-market together. For myself, if you don't know me, my name is Don Addington. I'm the Chief Growth Officer at Tackle. Been with Tackle really since the very early days when we had just a handful of customers and just a little bit of revenue, and have worked with hundreds of customers over the past number of years, helping them build their own cloud go-to-market strategies. But I've also had to work at Tackle as the CRO to build our cloud go-to-market strategy and really learn and grow along the way. And it's people like Christine and Hillorie who have really helped me in my own journey. So today, hopefully, if we do this right, this should be much less a presentation coming at you. You'll notice a distinct lack of slideware and guidance in terms of visuals. We're going to have a conversation, and this should hopefully really kind of read or play much more like a podcast you're listening into amongst three folks who talk about this stuff actually all the time, even when Nicole and our team haven't asked us to do this for an audience. So that said, we got a little bit of time and a lot of stuff to talk about, so we're going to launch and get into this. So hello, Christine. Hello, Hillorie. Maybe a quick hello, and I'll set the stage for our talk, and we'll get into it.
Absolutely. Hello from Normandy. I just looked out the window and all the cows are surfing the internet. That's the problem.
Livestock.
Hello, everyone. This is Christine. I look forward to having a podcast-like discussion with you.
Cool. So what we're going to talk about today, again, we could talk about a lot, and we tend to roam a little bit. Our friend Joshua Haskins, I should note, will be joining us, and will be helping us moderate the questions, which we'll hit at the end. And so any questions you have, Please keep them coming. Josh was going to be taking a look at them and will help us address questions at the end. And then, of course, we're always available to help spill over. So if we do this right, what we're going to be talking about really is everybody here understands that cloud go-to-market is a very effective way to grow revenue, to grow more profitable revenue, and really to lean into ecosystems that are beneficial. Most that are joining us are probably joining us because they're doing it right now, or they're looking at doing it, or they've done it in the past and they need to do it where they're at. And this should really be a session where the three of us talk about our experiences and really what is the continuous support that you need from an executive team and a broader team to create, maintain, and in a lot of cases, even relaunch a cloud go-to-market strategy and a marketplace strategy. Everybody is somewhere on that spectrum. A lot of the times we're talking to folks who are, we tried, it didn't go well, I didn't build the support, how do I do this again? We'll cover that. Christine is working mostly with enterprises today. Hillorie has worked at large enterprises, but does a ton of work with startups today. So we think there's something for everybody in here. And what was been interesting kind of as we all talked through this and prepared for the session was a theme emerged. Several did, but really, in order to be the most effective about, working with your entire organization and namely the C-suite to build successful cloud go-to-market, we found, we kept on coming back to this. Enterprises need to think more like startups, and startups need to think a little bit more like enterprises. And so we're going to weave that in a little bit here. What we mean is, when you're an enterprise, you have the propensity to sort of corp the hell out of everything. Overthink it, overplan it, overpromise, underdeliver because all those things that I just said beforehand. And really, what's the lean and scrappy way to start, but keeping a big picture in mind. And as a startup, you tend to do things lean, scrappy, and maybe even sometimes a little slapdash just to get the job done. And there's not really that programmatic tie to how are we going to take this from lean and scrappy to scale it and grow it, and how do you really pitch and position that so everybody is bought in, and how do you speak the right language to the right people? So we're going to talk about that. What is this spectrum of kind of getting started, of gaining buy-off, and of like, great, how do I put some of these plans into action? So that's the chat today. I think we've kind of divided this into a couple of different sections, which I like to call chapters. So chapter one, I'm just going to throw it out to Christine and Hillorie. One of the things we talked about as we talk about sort of like, what's the initial approach to cloud go-to-market and setting up a cloud go-to-market? And again, this may be, you're just starting to do it, or maybe you've got to do it all over again. But we really talked about the importance of like scope and structure, and how important that can be when you're thinking about an initial approach and what you guys have learned in your past that's really helped you there. So I'm just gonna kind of maybe hand it off to let me hand it off to Christine maybe to get us started with, and Hillorie, I'm sure that the both of us will kind of pop in there, but maybe you can talk a little bit about on that, Chris.
Oh, I think
so John,
I don't know.
Yep,
there we go. Yeah. Do you want me to start, Christine? Are you there?
Start, everyone get back in. You guys go ahead. I'm ready.
Okay. Yeah, I'm happy to start.
So, Hillorie, you kick us off.
Yeah, absolutely. So coming from a big company background, a trained approach, obviously sometimes you have mindset. I was very fortunate to join a fantastic startup, different country. It was a radically different approach. I think the first chapter is the listening. The request can come tops down. It can come from the C-level saying, we need to be on marketplace, or we're seeing customers who are asking for us to buy on marketplace. It can come bottoms up. You can actually have that information ideally from SFTC. You can have it from many different sources, from customers out in the field saying, you know what, we really need to be available on the marketplace. We need to bubble this up to the C-level. So regardless of the size of the organization and the approach you're going to take, it's a lot of asking questions, and it's a lot of peeling back the demand. Is it from the customers? Is it a mandate from C-suite that has been from the board of investors, or it's coming from one of the founders? Is it from the field sales SVP? Where are these questions coming from? And then from there, unpacking it or kind of peeling it back a little bit like an onion layer. Are we seeing demand? Do we have SFDC? In our case, we had just launched SFDC. Do we have the data available? So it's a lot of asking questions. It's a lot of initial validation. And that's something that if you have an owner, if you have a single person, is pretty easy. If you're just hearing it, you're a team, you're part of the alliances organization, oh my gosh, we need to be on marketplace. That can get very, very confusing very quickly. I think it's good early on to have a person who is running point. I don't want to say a leader, a person who's going to run point on the marketplace initiative. And from there, start to run point on collecting all of the questions. Who's asking this question? And then also writing down some of those answers. And I'm going to pause there and see if Christine is Christine back with us?
I think she's not yet. I think of course, this always happens, at the best time. She's working on dialing in. I think like all of that is I think really well taken. And what a lot of what we're seeing is customers and just ISPs in general wanting to use more data-based and data-driven decisions to where should we go? Is there signal there? Are my customers buying in these ways? And a lot of what you just said kind of highlights those things. I want to take it back a step to one of the things we talked about was really when you're starting to try to build the support for this program and defining what the program is going to be, whether you're building it from the beginning or whether you're sort of relaunching. There is, one route is kind of like, I'm a one-man bandit, one-woman bandit, and put this all together, and I'm just going to kind of, do the best that I can. What you and Christine talked about, which I thought was really helpful, is some of the structure for building a program like this and setting the stage for what a program like this might look like with your leadership. And I think some of what you picked up at HPE and Christine had picked up at Splunk and a number of the companies that she's worked at. So maybe if you can chat a little bit on that topic, like how do you set the stage and plan to set the stage so that you're delivering a message that is going to be heard and received well?
Absolutely. I would say net, ask the tough questions first. It'll make your life easier later. And when we hear programmatic, when we hear kind of spreadsheets, it can get very overwhelming very quickly. So immediately, if you're in an enterprise, you're thinking enterprise, we're going to need to get buy-in. We need to have, a major meeting, a QBR. No. Or if you're in a startup, where do I start? It's singular. Who do I bring in? It really doesn't matter. Start where you're at and start asking those questions. And once you start asking those questions, align those to kind of what you're hearing, because you might have a C-suite or a founder. Organizations are looking at marketplaces for different things. Either they want to capture demand that they're seeing, they have a lot of customer demand, or they're looking for additional routes to market for revenue. It might be, we need to see 20% uptick in the next X amount of quarters. We're not seeing it here. If we launch on a marketplace, will we see why? Well, before saying, yes, we can, you got to validate those questions. You have to ask those questions. So your initial approach should really be asking those questions, scoping, and knowing that you don't have to start big. You don't have to overthink it. You don't have to right size it. You just have to start bringing in all of the baseline framework for the project itself, which launching in a cloud marketplace, irrespective of size, is a lot like a product launch or a lot like a business unit initiative. It includes sales, engineering. We'll talk about it later, but basically setting the stage is thinking about all of the functions that you're going to work with, right sizing it, and not overthinking it. And Christina's back. Should I let her jump in here?
I'm going to give you maybe
the cloud. I'm blaming the cloud.
Blame the cloud. It's always the cloud. I'm going to give you a little bit of a lead-in, Christine, which is I'm going to do something annoying and target the Goldilocks zone, which is you said don't overplan, Hillorie, and I think also don't underplan. So what we were drawing on, Christine, while you were fiddling around with the cloud, was that those frameworks that you've used in your past that you learned, kind of earlier on at Sun, and some of those foundational things that are really strategic about building a program with this. Don't get mired in the details and Like, you don't have to make it look like a mountain you've got to climb, but you can't just go in with some of the answers. You got to have all the answers, even if you don't present all of them all at once. So how do you do that? Like, what are some of the foundational framework things that you learned that helped to frame you that? Because you brought a lot of those up when we were talking.
Well, spa days are included in that. Here's the thing. I think that the one thing that I think is anybody walking into looking at how to accelerate with marketplace, you have to be able to fly high, and you have to be able to fly low, and you have to know when to do that. And when I walked in, so with a company that we've talked about that I'm working with right now, there's an immediate project that needs to take place, right? So we have to scale this program in the next 3 months. Well, that program has dependencies across the organization. So, so how do you balance that? So one of the things that we're working on is, okay, well, let's create a pitch deck, and then we have the executive team understand the vision and the strategy and how this program plugs into it. And then things started morphing from there. It was, okay, well, gosh, this is looking more transformational. And then the team that's working on the program is like, oh no, corporate's involved. They're going to really slow us down. But that's not true, because now they're actually looking at it as a transformation project for the entire company, where they're actually going to look at this like a merger and acquisition, where they're going to have dashboards and meetings across all the stakeholders in the organization. And it's going to, let loose some of these critical problems that the team has been pushing uphill. So my job here is kind of like the standby, like, floating between the short-term vision and then the longer-term vision, and helping them and giving them the tools they need to execute.
Yeah.
And then
Understanding there's both there, right? And I think what you hit on is you've got the sizzle that you want. You've got, like, organization. I don't know if you guys have been paying attention, but organizations, especially large ones, love the word transformation for like the last decade and a half, but really more so over the past 5, 6, 7 years or so, right? And so tying into a transformational effort is important. Great, I have the sizzle of something that's important and big and can pay off big. That's great. Now, let's go to the other side. Let's chunk it down. Let's make it not something that I'm going to choke on, right? And I want to dovetail this into something that will lead us to the next chapter, but something I don't want to miss in us talking about here, because you both touched on it. So being able to hit that sizzle and to get into this transformational conversation, one of the things we talked about is cloud strategy and understanding, before you embark upon telling your story, what is my organization's cloud strategy? And I think a lot of people miss this because they think they know what the answer is. So, Hillorie, how do you find out what your cloud strategy is, and how do you tailor a message to that if you're inside of this big company or even a small company? What does cloud strategy really mean?
Chomping at a bit here because, Christine, and with a large organizational approach, you can't really do a rip and replace. It's a very pervasive approach that you have to work with across, product engineering, marketing, et cetera. On the flip side, maybe in a startup, when you go through and say, we're going to transact on the marketplace, crickets, who's going to book it? Do you have a deal desk? Is it going to be sales ops? Who's it going to be? Well, trickle that over to strategy all the way. If you, and back to asking those questions initially, you got to ask, you go as high up as you can go, or as broad as you can go. Whoever you feel within your organization has the closest grasp to what would be a cloud strategy or demand for, and start to ask those questions. I think 80 to 90% of the time, even within large organizations, because you have that trickle down or you have business unit silos, it's not coordinated. It's difficult.
Yeah.
I don't really think any organization has nailed their cloud strategy, even the largest ones, when you get down into the organizations. So how do you peel that back and away from being very specific with a marketplace initiative?
Well, I think too, and you get all wrapped up in this idea of cloud strategy as something like a Bain or a BCG or a McKinsey would drop down a 500-page tome on here's the strategy. No. If I go talk to product, if I go talk to engineering, if I go talk to strategy, if I go talk to our CEO, if your CEO is talking to shareholders, hey, what are the things that are important about cloud that we need to leverage in our own products, in our own relationships, in our own. So Christine, we were talking about this yesterday. Maybe you can like carry on that, because I think we get hold on, like, yeah, our cloud strategy is we need to partner with AWS. Bzzzt, not a strategy.
No.
Right? So
No,
what does it mean,
no.
Christine?
No.
What's it mean?
Okay, first of all, I love that you led me a little bit on the consulting piece, like Bain and McKinsey and all those. So that did happen at the company that I'm working with, and I always say, that's great. You reported the news, right? They reported the news. They showed churn. They showed on Payco. They had all these data points. And so that caused a negative riff over within the cloud, alliance team. It's like, what's going on? We're losing, And so my strategy really is I'm numbers. I go in and I go peel back the analytics of the finances and the financials. And so when I started looking at it, and I said, well, what are all the routes and the ways that we could actually grow our business, and specifically with this program? So they're looking at launching channel, including channel in that. Okay, well, let's see. If we start with, this year, the rest of this year, what's that revenue look like, and what does that revenue look like going on? Then guess what? Your churn is minimal, right? But yet now you have this uptick in revenue with cloud that you didn't have before. It's net new. Channel partners are bringing that in. So now your entire cloud revenue has grown immensely to, double-digit growth. And the bigger consultants are looking at where the problem is. Where I come in is I'm looking at now, how do you solve it and get to market so you can actually go to market on those 3-4 different aspects of revenue, and that's all net new
for
them.
It's like
Hillorie, you're going to say something, and I'm gonna go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a very analytical approach to build out a very applicable strategy right there versus tops down.
Yeah. Well, and I think so. Look, great. Like we've sort of like we've got a framework in the back of our minds, right? You need to have a where are you going before you come up with this pitch. So understanding your strategy, identifying who the stakeholders are, who you need to go really nail down, some support with. Now we're getting to kind of like what's the next phase, and that's let's gain the buy-in. Let's get the buy-off, and this could be again relaunching a program that didn't work so well, right? What do I need to go back and do? And so it comes back to the pitch, right? And you need to kind of figure out what's the pitch, how am I pitching it, and how am I setting those expectations? And I love the more you can predict the future and talk about where the car is going to crash before the car crashes, I think the better you look, right? And so maybe talk about in your collective experience as you move this into, okay, I've identified and I can lean into the sizzle. Now let's talk about the pitch. And having the framework in mind and the end in mind, how do you structure the pitch to sort of predict the car crashes, which help you then kind of go get the buy-in? Let's talk about how you've started to weave that in at various places. Hillorie, maybe you want to get us kicked off.
Yeah, I think internal communication for this project is going to be a lot heavier than external, meaning with your, GCP, with Microsoft. It's going to be a lot of internal messaging, and that messaging needs to be level appropriate. So if you have a champion at a C level, you need to make sure you have your executive messaging. You're not going to go down into the weeds about GTA on launch time and this integration. You need to make sure you keep it to that level. You do hit the top 3 milestones, what it takes to get those milestones, and the asks, like, this is what I need for you. In addition to that, when you look at business unit leaders, you're going to have to work with engineering, with product, with finance, with legal. Make sure to message appropriately to your constituents and understand if they are, I don't want to say friend or foe, but organizations can be political. You might have an engineering team that's like, don't want to do this, not interested. You've got to figure out how to message to that team and with that team, and also let C-suite know that you need to remove a blocker. So when you think about the framework, think about the right messaging, the right tactics, and the right level to your audience. In addition to that, cadence is really important, and making sure you have it documented. And I'll give it over to Christine.
Well, can I go real quickly? You said something in there.
Sure.
I want to hit the bookend to your engineering example. You may have an engineering team or product team that says don't have time, can't do it, whatever. You may have the opposite. We must own this. It's going to take all of our involvement. We must integrate deeply from the beginning. we must do all these things. And punchline, we don't have time for it. So, go take a walk. Like, there's no way we can fit this on the backlog right now, right? I've seen both, and either
Yes.
one can derail. And so, Christine, I like the conversation you've had around, we actually don't need you right now, but once we show revenue and signal and dollars, here's the things we're going to need for you. I have a plan to, make sure you guys don't have to dive in before we've shown that signal. Maybe talk about that a little bit as you're making the pitch and pitching big, but like starting small.
Okay, let's see. I'm trying to riff off of you, Hillorie. You're not always going to get everybody's buy-in, right? And so you're going to have people that are going to question this. And this is why I'm really big on looking at it from a transformation. One of the framework, I think there was something in the chat said framework. I am a big believer in zone to win. We always want to there's 4 quadrants in that. There's the performance quadrant, there's the productivity quadrant, there's the transformation quadrant, and then there's the incubation quadrant. So when I'm looking at this, I'm saying, well, where does this fit with this company? And right now we're in the incubation quadrant. And so when you go to a stakeholder, you're going to pitch, we're going to pitch now to the CEO. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we're not going to talk about at the meeting. First, we're going to get an understanding of the nomenclature because they're making a swift shift in one way that they recognize cloud revenue to another way, which is marketplace. So first, let's get the naming right across the company. Next, we're going to talk about what the bigger strategy is. And next, we're going to talk about how we're going to do that. We're not going to talk about revenue. And you set it up. And this is something that I learned at a previous company in what we're not going to talk about versus what we're going to talk about, because that will eliminate immediately the rat hole. And then so yeah, exactly. So I'm going to present to you what we're going to talk about, and that actually helps with each organization. The other thing is, open source is my background, so open ideas and sharing is like I love bringing different groups together and then asking the question, not when can you get this done, but it's what would have to be true in order for you to do this. And when you ask the question, everybody's ideas start going, well, I need new headcount. I need more of this. I need more of that. And I'm just like jotting notes, right down. And because then it becomes, not only is it, you're in this incubation stage, but once you get the plan, do we have the right people to execute? And bigger companies do have change management, and there does take a level of change management. What you have in place today is not what you may need for tomorrow. And that's more in a bigger enterprise than maybe some of the smaller companies. But that's kind of where I've seen it.
Well, in the startups too, or smaller organizations, you might be leaning on an engineer that needs to write a landing page to do your backend hooks to get a bookable artifact. And if you're trying to force a round peg in a square hole and saying we need to launch in 6 weeks, and it's a forcing function, you might get different people within the organization digging in their heels. But if you actually sit down with the stakeholders or people who actually need to be involved, who you don't know are the stakeholders yet, for example, this engineer that would have to be in on 6 weekends after a product launch, and it's like, no way can I do this. You got to have the conversations. You have to be collaborative. You have to peel back the onion layer and look at potential car wrecks. And then in this situation, it was like, there's no way I'd ask this single engineer who's working on these launches to go write a webhook page. And this is where I'm going to plug tackle and say, boom, you've got expertise right there. That was taken care of. We were able to get the bookable artifact and move forward with the project very quickly. And again, it's digging a little deeper and asking the questions.
Yeah, I'd say if you landed there, though, if you're finding yourself landed in that spot where you've got these dependencies, like you didn't predict the car crash well enough, right? Like you need to, like you set the sizzle, you built the where do we want to go, but now what you need to do is come back and go, even if you're relaunching this program internally, right? Hey, here's where we've really hit a wall before. Here's what's really slowed us down before. Here's how I'm taking that out of the way so we can get from here to here faster, right? And I predict we're going to have problems here, and here. Maybe, Christine, you're chomping, so lean in and help me here. Yeah.
I'll tell you, that's where I had some scraped knees, right? So when somebody walks in and says, oh, I know how to do this, I've done this at another company, you always have a blind spot. There is always a blind spot. And so, and I've been victim of the blind spot. You know, there's always that person coming out of the woodwork going, well, wait a minute. Oh, no, we didn't talk to, you know, Sally or John or whoever, right? And I think it's also showing empathy. We're humans. We have a lot of work to do. And there's pressure, you know, in the engineering group and the product team. There's immense amount of pressure. And, you know, I lived in that world. And so it's like, how do you bring them into the cause, right? Like, get them excited about like where we're going. You know, that's a part of it. Like, I feel like I'm a hype person, you know, at this.
Positivity. It's a minor thing, but positivity.
It goes back to the strategy, though, right? So this goes back to, if you want people to be involved, and even if you need a hammer, if you can always go back to the strategy. Hey, if we do this, it's not just a partnership that we spun up that's doing well, right? Maybe now we're leveraging a better, tighter technical partnership with this partner because we're driving so much revenue through them, and there's greater lift. And that means we can do more with our product and the cloud provider's tech stack, you know, and that's important because it points back to these strategies, but you're connecting the dots all along the way. For everybody, you're a dot connector, and you have to do that. And the more proactively you can do it, the smarter you look and the fewer problems you have, because you're like, yes, remember when we talked about this? And I kind of called that this, like, always kind of, I think we've talked about like connecting those dots. So maybe any words on that, and then we're going to flow into like, okay, great, you know, planning. How do we scope? How do we build? How do we, you know, how do we do some of these things? And we'll get into Q&A.
So the person identified, ideally, and Christine the same, the person identified in leading the marketplace initiative is that dot connector. And it's not only connecting the dots, it's doing the plan, but it's also going to each constituent and doing a lot of homework and a lot of support with them offline. There are a lot of one-on-ones. You're a champion. It's positive. And as we get into planning, and I'll turn it over to Christine, milestones are really important. And each of these dot connectors, each of these individuals, these humans you're working with in organizations need to understand and feel like there's a predictable path with an outcome that is positive. And that's part of the planning, making sure that it's not just one big overwhelming project, that it's thinking big, starting small, with milestones, with, you know, people who are held accountable, and that it's done in a positive way. And Christine, I'll turn it over to you, because on an enterprise level, it's at scope, at scale. It's a major project.
Yeah. And you know, it's interesting because I've been able to learn about different organizations, so operations and finance. So, you know, we're working right now. We're saying, okay, let's look at our whole quote to cash process. Then now we bring in the people that are involved along that train along the way. So what we found out in that scoping meeting, we were down to the 500-foot level. Like, I feel like I have like a hard hat with a light on, you know, I'm really going in deep.
And I'm going to get you a hard hat now, just so you know.
But it's like, oh, we have a CPQ issue, you know, CPQ. Now, what is the tech stack? What's the current tech stack? How do you put in a direct sale? How does channel put in that, right? Oh, support. What kickstart support? How do you get an automatic email? Does that email go to the customer? Like that, those details are so important because that will stop, because them getting, you know, the sales, well, we got one in already. And it's like, well, what about 100? How are you going to get 100 private offers, right? How are you going to do this?
Well, but this is back to the Goldilocks zone, right? So I'm gonna do this real quickly. You need to be very specific, right? And it's like, listen, we're gonna get this. Everybody wants, like, we're gonna do a few, or, you know, we're gonna do, by the time we get to 100, we'll need this. By the time we get to 200, we'll need this. Whether that's orders, whether it's 100,000, 100 million, whatever it is. Whatever your targets are, right? But at these stages and at these gates, here's the things that we're going to plan to meet. Because if we don't, this is what happens. But if we do, this is what happens, right? And I think being very adept at negotiating that conversation is really important. And don't undersell your value as the key stakeholder driving this project. Like, that's the value you need to be able to bring to the plate. It's not just, hey, I think this is gonna be a great partnership. It's really the tough work and I'm a hockey fan, right? It's the work in the corners, right? Like, it's digging in there and doing all that work, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So look, we should have like 3 hours to do this, and we've got 10 more minutes or so. So really, let's maybe touch real quickly on, let's put this all into, a plan. So you've got, great. I think we talked about key stakeholders. I think let's talk about sort of like getting the buy-in. And one thing we centered on was really, who do you need to get close to? And how do you align on a shared set of maybe metrics, if you will, of like, great, when we do these things, like everybody's gonna be happy. And am I on the right page there? Like, talk about like who to build the alignment with, maybe a little bit to put this planning into action. And that'll cover kind of like stakeholders and timelines and things like that. But I'm gonna let you run with it, Christine.
So I think, we touched on this in one of our many discussions. And, you had asked, should we go to the CRO in sales or should we look at bridging a gap between the channel leader who sometimes has like the channel and alliances. And when you asked that question to Hillorie and we both gave you different answers. And so I think once again, it goes back to, even though you deem yourself as like this cloud expert, every company is different. The political arena is different. When you're a VP and you're leading the charge, you have to understand the lay of the land, and that's where that blind spot comes in. And this great news I had.
Asking the questions. Yeah.
Yes, that's right. And yes, and so and be very curious. I'm curious. But what for me, the chief revenue officer was my friend, because he had the visibility across both worlds and was seen as the go-to person with the CEO. So I developed a very nice relationship. He had a program that was rocking in sales, and that's where sales effort was going. So I said, how do I tie into that? And when we tied into that, and he helped do that. So he became my my person to help me kind of get in there. And I think Hillorie, you had a different experience, but similar to that.
Yeah, and this is eerily similar to a sales cycle. Finding your champion, understanding who the buyer is. It's very much that. If you're getting a request from tops down, if it's a startup and the CEO is like adamant about it, then it's potentially easier, or it's potentially more difficult if you have other founders that were not necessarily aligned. But if you're getting it from a sales team in a particular region, that can be more complex as well. Again, I go back to practice, practice, practice. Just like any sport, it's a lot of practice. And where the practice comes in is asking the questions so you really have a clear understanding of the lay of the land. In addition, and in parallel of understanding the lay of the land of your constituents, is understand the outcomes. I don't know about you. I regularly fall on my face. I don't like to. I like to avoid it. So for me, in terms of doing a project to avoid that, I'm going to go make a data-driven decision. And that's Salesforce. That's current pipeline, future pipeline. That's go-to-market propensity with Microsoft, GCP, or AWS, or whoever I'm working with. I'm going to map that trifecta and set myself up for success. And then look at taking the right leveling for the actual initiative. Again, not too big, not too small, right size, based on these three things here.
Let me, and I'm gonna bring a little bit of a different perspective in here real quickly, and then we'll tie off and go to Q&A. First, we have to take a break for our sponsor, Athletic Greens. No, just kidding. Can
I correct myself on something? It was the VP of Rev. It was the VP of RevOps that I went to, not the CRO. So I had to correct myself.
You need them all to tie off on that and to agree, but in a different way. I would say what we're getting at here is communication is paramount, and you can't just communicate the same way to everybody. So I'd say you got to know who your somebodies are. You got to know their love language, and you got to know and get agreement from them up front with like, here's how I'm going to talk to you, right? Here's what I'm going to measure. Am I on the right track? If it's a CRO, Like, listen, you think I'm a channel and alliances, and this is just another channel I'm spinning up? Like, bullshit. That's not what I'm doing here. Let's work on this together. What are the metrics? Like, here's what I'd like to communicate to you, right? Is that the value you want to see? And then agree on the framework by which you're going to do that, and then multiply that times stakeholders, right? But know their language, know how they want to talk. So
And
we have
give
5
to get.
or less to go on questions, but Hillorie, send us off into questions.
I was going to say it's a give to get. There has to be something in it for them as well. I mean, I'll say that selfishly. There has to be something in it for me. And if I'm going to own a cloud marketplace initiative for the next 12 to 18 months, what's the end state for myself, and also the revenue, hopefully, and success we're going to see? And I'll stop there.
Cool, thanks. Joshua, why we'd love to do a summary and talk about all the things we talked about. I'd encourage everybody to go back and watch the video maybe. If you're joining in late or anything like that. Joshua's going to tee us up with some questions here, and we'll try to do fast. So,
yeah, for sake of time here, I'll be quick. But thanks for the informative session, Don. It's always a wellspring of information from you three, and Christine and Hillorie. I really appreciate you joining, and I know our viewers were able to glean some positive information from the talks. It looks like we've received quite a few questions around areas of improvement within a cloud GTM strategy, and any pitfalls to avoid along that journey. So let's it's a big one, right? So let's start with this one. What's a mistake you would never make again? And whoever wants to field that, feel free to just jump in here.
Well, I've got 2 that were exceedingly painful. Gave me good gray hair. One was embarking on doing the first marketplace listing myself, reading the documentation and fumbling through actually getting that listing out onto the marketplace. I would not recommend that ever. But if you should do it, that leads to number 2, which was don't go in and set up all of the accounts and currencies and bank accounts and everything yourself, especially without speaking to the finance team. And this will probably be more aligned to startups. But those 2 in themselves can create a significant amount of pain, and we'll call it an 18-wheeler car crash. And I'll turn it over to Christine.
Let me, real quick, what we talked about was, especially on that, man, if you're thinking about, I need to support a global operation and you have yet to succeed in a smaller area of focus, you're going to derail, right? And so we talked a little bit about that as we were prepping for this. Christine, I don't know if you wanted to lean into that, or if you've got some other, different perspectives you wanted to add.
There's one that I was thinking about, and this is an important one that we didn't touch on, which was commissions. So when I was creating the comp plan for our cloud business, I wanted to stop payment on the PAYGO in order to infuse private offers. And when I presented it to my EVP of sales, he's like, Christine, I get where you're going, but that ship you're turning way too hard. So, but he ended up doing it, and the field was so mad. They were so mad. So we had to cycle back. So, but we were trying to position, going more for annual, bigger contracts. So the commissions piece is my big learning.
Don't even get me started. I got plenty to talk about there. I think we're at time.
We are at time.
Aw.
Is there so
ready?
Rumor has it, and I don't know how this works, so I'm just going to put it out there. Rumor has it there's a lounge, and we can join people for more questions there if you want to keep the conversation going. And I think maybe we can hang out for a little bit, Hillorie and Christine, if you're open to it. And I don't know how to go to the lounge, so I'm just told that there was one. So maybe Joshua or in the notes, you can. I think we just stick here for the audience what they need to do.
Yeah.
And for the audience out there, whoever does or does not join us, it has been great. So
you all are phenomenal. These 2 are powerhouses and great minds and great thinkers with great experience. Lean into them, leverage them. And really appreciate this and all the great chat in the windows. I think there was a request for us to actually spin up the podcast. So we'll see.
We're coming soon.
Cool.
Oh, I love the cow jiffy with the hair. I missed that one. Now I'm looking to the right. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna look at all of these.
Cool.